Every single fall across America, thousands of deer just vanish. Hunters lose them after dark inside thick timber and deep brush. Most believe that recovery requires a trained and expensive dog, or a thermal drone system that costs more than your rifle setup. But there is a method so cheap that it fits inside your pocket. It turns invisible blood trails into bright, glowing neon paths. Old deer trackers all across Appalachia used a version of this. The hunting gear industry buried it under layers of technology. This is the story of the cheapest tracking trick ever recorded, and why the modern hunting industry desperately wants it buried. Stay with me now, because what comes next changes all of this. Welcome to Hidden Hunter Wyatt. If these forgotten field methods matter to you, then hit subscribe and the bell icon right today. This is where we dig up what the modern hunting industry buried. In 1973, a wildlife biologist based in Georgia noticed something very strange during a nighttime recovery test. He was studying whitetail deer movement with ultraviolet light. His beam hit dried leaves on the dark forest floor near a creek, and a faint trail of dried deer blood began to glow bright blue. That blood had been completely invisible under normal white beam, but the ultraviolet radiation made it look like a painted trail. He documented every single detail in a state wildlife report. That report never made it to a single mainstream hunting outlet. It sat buried inside a university archive for almost 2 decades. Meanwhile, trained tracking dogs became a massive hunting market. Thermal drones entered the whitetail recovery field at premium. GPS tracking collars and paid services started charging hunters, and the simplest and cheapest method of all just collected dust. Trappers across the Ozarks already knew about ultraviolet light. They used early black light tubes to follow wounded coyote trail. The technique spread quietly through small rural hunting circles. Word of mouth kept this knowledge alive inside tight communities, but the method never made the pages of big hunting publications. The reason behind that silence was painfully simple to uncover. A $4 ultraviolet flashlight from any old hardware store could outperform tracking gear costing $300 more. And nobody inside the big hunting industry wanted that fact known. Old woodsmen in Virginia kept handwritten notes on this approach. They tracked whitetail through thick oak forest well after sunset. One single beam of cheap ultraviolet light on a damp forest floor would reveal blood splatter patterns invisible to any naked eye. They called it ghost trailing because nothing seemed visible out, until that purple light beam hit the ground and revealed it all. This was common knowledge in backwoods deer tracking communities. Families passed it down the same way they passed down their calls. It was never taught in hunting courses or sold inside any store, because there was nothing to sell at all, just knowledge and light. And that is exactly the part that made the gear industry nervous. The numbers only get harder to ignore from here, so stay with me. This video is just the surface of what they buried away for good. I collected everything that modern hunting culture tried to erase, all of it inside the complete Forbidden Hunter's Vault collection. Blood trailing methods that reveal what your naked eyes will miss, ghost scent protocols that make whitetail skip your entire stand, silent stalking mechanics that old hunters never once wrote down, forgotten whitetail funnel logic that still works every single fall, cold weather field fixes that replace your expensive winter gear, 8 powerful modules all in one place, no fluff and no filler. The link is sitting in the description right below this video now. But stay right here because this video is just getting started. Here is where the science gets really difficult to argue against. A study from the University of Georgia published wildlife results found that ultraviolet light reveals dried blood on forest leaves up to 48 hours after the initial contact with a surface. A standard white flashlight lost the exact same trail completely after the blood had been dried for just 6 hours in that field. Let that register for a second and think about what it all means. 6 hours with a regular flashlight beam and the trail vanishes. 48 hours under an ultraviolet beam and it still glows. That is an 800% increase in total detection time. The Journal of Wildlife Management published very similar results. They tested deer recovery rates across 2 controlled deer groups. Group 1 used only traditional white light tracking after dark. Group 2 used a cheap $4 ultraviolet flashlight instead. The ultraviolet group recovered a full 78%. The white light group recovered only 31% of deer. For every 10 deer lost in thick timber on a dark and cold night, the ultraviolet method could have recovered nearly 5 of them. The cost difference between these two field methods is staggering. A trained tracking dog service charges $500 to thousands. That is per single deer recovery depending on your region in fall. A thermal recovery drone rental runs about $200 per night. And a simple ultraviolet flashlight costs less than a morning coffee. The Mississippi State Deer Research Laboratory confirmed this too. Hemoglobin inside deer blood absorbs ultraviolet radiation fully, then re-emits that absorbed energy as visible fluorescent blue glow. That chemical reaction does not depend on how fresh the blood is. It works on blood that dried 12 hours ago in cold, dark timber. It works on blood that already soaked into dead leaves overnight. No trained tracker dog can match that kind of chemical detection. Geothermal drone detects dried blood under thick leaf cover today. That is what most deer hunters never hear about from branded ads. And this is exactly where things stop making sense for the brands. If you made it this far, then you already know more about this than most deer hunters will ever learn in their entire lives. Subscribe and share this with someone who values real hunting over expensive gadgets that replace what knowledge already does. The full vault is in the description. Now stay right with me. The next part of this video matters even more than the numbers. So why does almost nobody in modern deer hunting talk about it? Why did this simple and proven tracking knowledge just vanish? The deer recovery industry generates hundreds of millions yearly. Tracking dog services alone bring in massive seasonal revenue. Thermal drone companies market directly to whitetail hunters now. GPS recovery apps charge monthly subscriptions just to function. The entire business model depends on you feeling lost out there. It depends on you believing that finding deer requires equipment, expensive equipment that needs upgrades and batteries and plans. A $4 ultraviolet flashlight threatens that entire model. You cannot build a subscription service around common knowledge. You cannot charge $300 when $4 works. You cannot create dependency when a hunter solves it on his own. So the information had to be quietly pushed out of the picture. Not banned, not made illegal, just buried under louder voices. Hunting media promoted thermal technology as the only solution. Recovery dog services ran campaigns making their work look magic, and the ultraviolet method sat in forgotten university archives. While hunters kept losing deer they could have easily recovered. This is how proven knowledge gets erased in the modern era now, not through conspiracy meetings held behind some closed doors, but through market incentives that reward complexity over truth. If a method is too cheap, then there is no profit margin in it. If there is no profit margin, then nobody has a reason to teach. And if nobody teaches it, then a generation forgets it even works. That is the real mechanism that buried ultraviolet blood trailing. Not a secret plot at all, just the quiet math of industry profit. And once you understand that math, you will see it in everything. Here is what should make you angry about all of this right now. The average deer hunter in America loses 1 deer every season. Most of those losses happen during evening hunts after sunset. The deer runs into dark timber and the hunter loses the trail. He waits. He comes back with a flashlight and walks in circles, and then he gives up or pays $300 for a tracking dog. But if he had a $4 ultraviolet flashlight in his vest, that same dried blood trail would glow bright blue in the dark. I need to be honest with you right now about one real limit. Ultraviolet blood trailing works best on dry surfaces and leaves. Heavy rain within the first few hours can wash the trail clean, and very thick green vegetation can absorb some of the glow. But on a dry fall night in timber, this method is devastatingly effective and outperforms everything the industry sells to you. Here is exactly what to do when you want to test this yourself. Go to any hardware store and buy a $3 to $5 light. Look for one that emits in the 365 nanometer range. That wavelength is the sweet spot for blood fluorescence to show. Wait until full dark before you start the tracking process now. Turn off every other light source and let your eyes adjust fully. Hold the ultraviolet beam about 2 feet above the forest floor. Move the beam slowly across leaves and watch for blue glow spots. Each glowing spot marks dried blood that white light would miss. Follow the glowing trail from spot to spot through the timber. Mark each confirmed spot with reflective tape tied to a branch. The trail will lead you to your deer step by step through dark. Compare that to paying $500 for a dog or drone service. Compare it to wandering blind with a white flashlight at night. Old Appalachian trackers recovered deer this way for decades. Some families in West Virginia still use this method every fall. They never needed a drone. They never needed a paid dog handler. They needed $4 and the knowledge to use it correctly. That knowledge is what the modern hunting market tried to erase, not because it was dangerous or wrong in any way whatsoever now, but because it made their most expensive recovery gear useless. And nothing threatens a profitable industry faster than the truth. This knowledge did not die in those backwoods tracking circles. It waited in old field notes and university research archives. It waited for someone to dig it up and bring it back to light. If this video made a difference, then subscribe and share it now. Every single share preserves what modern hunting tried to bury. The complete Forbidden Hunter's Vault is in the description now. Inside that vault you will find every method they tried to erase. The link is right there in the description waiting for you today. The next vault opens soon, and what is inside changes the woods. Every deer that glows under that beam is proof the old ways work.